I know this is a really bad, I really wish I had a skeletal system here, but most people think that the skull is a ball, that, so the eyes are in their socket, the mouth, and the ears go through, in this kind of situation. But if you actually look at the skull, and the skull is interesting for several reasons. First of all, again, even to look at the skull this way, and I'll pass this around if you want to see closer. When people look at the skull straight on, again, they still think that it's one circle. But actually, if you look at the skull this way, it's going to start playing games with it. The encasement of the brain really only goes in this area. So that's where you're getting your part that your circle. So the whole part of the face is actually coming off of this. And I also believe that the bone here, and if you look at the size of the second profile, that's again looks more like a seesaw when you look at that teeter-totter, that balance that goes back and forth. So when the skull has to go sideways, up and down. This is where it kills me too. Anybody knows, it's anyone that does computers. Can we get an app that makes the skeletal system move? I should be able to go toot toot. No, not with this thing. All bones are linear, and I don't get it because people are not. So when you look at the skull again from behind, again you're seeing this circle. And the circle, the spine is actually quite large. People think too, like we do stick figures, that it's a circle on top of just a stick. But it's more of a tree trunk. It's quite large. And see too, you see the same thing here. Let me take the pen on and off. See how the second profile again? Do you see that very long profile? So again, you're getting that seesaw. So if I go this way with my head, so the skull is quite organized on the system. So even when we look at the skull from above, you see again that circular system, but there's the face starting to come off where it hangs off of like a shield. But what's really interesting, and this is where you probably have to come closer, I'll pass it around. And this is where I'm going to talk to you. Her husband has a ringing of the ears, so we're going to cover that a bit. But come on in. Oh, good. You didn't miss too much. And we're covering the skull, and I'll go over a real quickie, and then we'll get to work. But if you actually enlarge the skull, do you see right in here? That's where the eustachian tubes come down through the ear. Okay? So they're on both sides here. There's small holes in the lower area of the skulls. I'm not going to get into anatomy. That's not the point of the whole thing. Here it's about movement, and you can go home and study if you want to. So when you look at the actual ears, we're going to be looking at the nasal cavities with the lesson, and then we're going to do the ears. So again too, look at all of that. That's your whole nasal cavity. Do you see how it's like a whole honeycomb, like a bee? All up in there. You see all this is the main maxillaries, and here's for your eye sockets, obviously, but our sinuses, and the reason I'm big on sinuses is because of my son Graham, because he has such chronic face. So if I go back to here, you have sinus cavities here. The sinus cavities go actually all through here. That's the nose, which is the main, and then behind the eyes itself. So if I was doing a side, again too, your sinus cavity literally goes all around the nose. So my son's infection was all here. So that's where his infection was, through the center of the nose here. So his infection, the mass of it was all here. And then when he would get really bad, then the maxillaries would fill up and so forth. But that's where, so if you touch your eyes, you can start to see where the vision gets easily distorted. That's the pressure of the sinus cavity has on the vision. So when children and people have issues with sinuses, how easily the eyes get affected with the pressure. So what I'm basically trying to explain, most people think that the skull, if you look straight on, is a circle. But if you actually look, the encasement or the circle is actually here. And the face hangs off of that. And it's three-dimensional. It's the only part, too, in the human body where the bones are three-dimensional. Now, you can say that, too, about the chest cavity. Come on, baby. Come on, go home. Okay. Modern technology. Anyway, I don't look at the ribs as the same. The ribs are so wide and they go so around. Again, the ribs actually go around. It's not a honeycomb network. Also, any other bone, and this is how anthropologists can always tell what kind of bone it is, all bones are smooth all the way around except for the cranium bones. The cranium bones have stenosis and stuff that come in. It's a fibrous that holds the gray matter in. So it's not a smooth interior. So that's what moves the brain around. But that's when you get a hard hit to the head or the concussion, it actually, you're spiking the brain. And that's where you can die from those hard falls. So when people look at the whole structure of the head and everything, people, again, think of the back of the neck because that's the part we lay on. They're not thinking of the volume of the neck, first of all. So when I turn my head, I should have total rotation with the shoulder girdles. But most people do this kind of thing, or very limited movement. They're not thinking of the whole body. Babies do not. I just listed all that on the website. Babies, when they sit and move around, they're like this. Actually, a more adult behavior is to learn to sit there and don't move. And it's hard for kids to do because just to get that ball, they don't know how to just kind of do this to get the ball. They're like, they move. And they think it's funny on top of that. And we're trying to get them to, so it takes about 15 years to teach a kid to actually sit still. But to look at the whole nasal cavity, first of all, I cover this a lot. There's a rotation that should happen. My jaw should be free. I should be able to float my jaw when I do this back and forth. If I'm looking just at the eyes, there's a rotation that should happen. If I look up, if I look down, there's a rotation that should happen. And so when you have stuff like cerebral palsy and stuff, now you start getting, where the eyes are fixed with the head. So it's not so much looking at the way the head is shaped, but how you can start moving the head or floating the head, first of all, that the head becomes independent from the neck, because that's another thing. You don't want the neck, everything to be together. You know what I mean? If actually you try and do that's really hard to do on the eyes and stuff. If you push the eyes actually up and stiffen the neck. By the way, the reason I do all this, to me, I can visualize very easily. I can see all of you right now in a skeletal system. I have no problem doing that. But where I really do my best, and this is where I used to do when I first started training, is I actually put myself in that person's body. So like Cesadine, who comes to me, he has severe scoliosis. So I can very easily put myself into his situation. See, even this, I'm losing my ability to talk because of the way I've got to move my back and get into position that he's in. So when I'm in this kind of position, I think, what can I do to help? And when I first got with him, I'm like, he's got to breathe. He can't breathe in this position. I had to go after the breath. So I can easily, morph myself into any one of yours body, and feel what it's like, and go, oh, this is interesting, but what would I do different? So instead of criticizing or thinking, well, that person's not like me, God bless them that they're not like me. They shouldn't be like me. That's why we're all different. We have different jobs. I do this, you do that. We're not meant to be the same, but at the same time to appreciate what someone's doing. So like you were talking about the little kid going to the bathroom and sitting down every time and stuff, because that was just his rhythm that someone allowed him to get into, and he liked that. Oh, come on, let's go. Or maybe someone was always telling him what he was going to do next, so he liked that structure. So I sit down and someone will tell me, oh, come on, we're going to go do this, or whatever. My kids can't go to sleep at night without knowing what the plans are for tomorrow. They're just... And so it's just interesting, but to offer someone a more efficient way to move, that's the whole purpose. Because the more options you have for movement, it's just like you have more options for your vocabulary. A 3-year-old's going to get frustrated. Why? Because they don't have options in their vocabulary to explain or articulate their needs to you. And even if they do, they don't understand back when you're telling them no. And they are really dead set on yes and why this isn't going to happen. So, because they just have a limited verbal vocabulary going in and coming out. So when I see people yell at children, and like I had this 2-year-old next to me, and he went down to the mailbox and the mom screamed at him, "Do you comprehend what I'm saying?" Oops, sorry. What 2-year-old knows what the word comprehend means, much less the concepts of comprehend? Because most of our language is conceptual, not just memorizing. So, and if you can't visualize what you're saying, you have a hard time talking, I think. But a lot of people don't visualize, so, if I'm looking at, like unfortunately, all those people just died in Japan because of the volcanic explosion. But I wanted to know why they died. Did they die from the gas? Did they die from because I didn't see lava, because that's all I understand is with volcanoes there's lava and you die. So I finally found one article that said because of the polyclastic explosion. And I'm like, that's great. What's a polyclastic explosion? That's not a word that we just say every day. But what it was not only did they die of the gas fumes, but when that spurt of what you just see ashes comes out is actually stones being pummeled at you at 300, 400 miles an hour. And then on top of that, the gravitational pull comes down, and that's why you always see go down the mountain versus just always going up in the air. It's like, and as it goes down the mountain, it accelerates harder. So if you're just, it just takes you out. So, again, I didn't know why they had to die, but I just hate when people say they died. Well, So I'm going to show, first we're going to do lessons on the face, really to deal with the maxillaries. And then we'll do a lesson on going through the ears, because, that's the one thing I didn't say with the ears. Okay, my ear canals, okay, they go into the head. So they don't truly attach to one another, but they'll go into my head. But also the eustachian tubes go down. That's where I showed you the 2 holes that go through the skull and down through, so that's where you need to swallow and stuff. People only see the ears, again, as a very topical, but what I'm going to be doing actually is showing you how you can work with the ears and really feel the whole canals connecting through the head, which is pretty wild. So